Check this thing out. This is the brand new Cinepeer Weebill 3E from Zhiyun. Before we get started, I do want to say that Zhiyun did send me this gimbal for free, but no money has changed hands and I'm in no way obligated to give them a positive review. As always with videos like this, I will do my absolute best to give you guys my honest opinions. Can I just start the video off by saying that I can't believe how good this thing is for the money. For $250 US, I have a small compact gimbal that I'm able to balance a full-size Sony a7 IV with a small rig half cage and a Sony 24-70 G Master Mark I. The 3E comes packaged in a styrofoam box. Be sure not to throw this away because this is going to double as your travel case for your gimbal. So let's open it up and I'll show you guys what comes in the base package. First of all, you have your mounting base plate. Then you have a USB-C to USB-A cable, a USB-C to USB-C cable. You have an Allen wrench and your tightening screw there for the base plate. You have a mini tripod and you have the gimbal itself. All right, let's take a closer look at the gimbal itself. So when you first pull it out of the packaging, you'll notice how small it is. It comes in at just 3.2 pounds and its dimensions are just slightly bigger than a standard 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which is really nice. So let me attach the tripod so I can stand this thing up and go over some of the features of the gimbal with you. All right, so starting at the top, you'll see that it's a pretty standard configuration with 3 axes of rotation. At the top, you have your tilt. Back here, you have your roll, and at the bottom, you have your pan. Each of the axes has a manual lock to help in the balancing process and for keeping everything together when you're packing this thing down for travel. All of the balancing mechanisms are tightened with either a lever lock, like down here on the pan axis, or a ratcheting knob, like this one. Coming down this arm over here, you'll see that there's a USB-C cable outlined by this yellow trim ring around it. That USB-C port is for controlling your camera via a connected wire. That will allow you to control things like shutter speed, aperture, and ISO if your camera is supported. So please check the camera compatibility list before you purchase. Another cool thing about this gimbal is that it does have a native portrait mode. And to do that, all you have to do is remove this plate here, the camera mounting plate, and then you flip it on its end like so and tighten it down. And now your camera can be mounted vertically without having to move your base plate to the side of your camera, which is a very nice feature. I know vertical content is really blowing up. Well, it has been blowing up, and so it's a really important feature for a lot of you out there. So that's cool. Coming down to the grip, at the top, you'll see that there's a trigger. Now, on a single press, that can be customized to enter the gimbal mode of your choosing. A double click will automatically recenter the gimbal to its home position, and a triple click will put the gimbal into selfie mode. Coming down further, we have a control wheel right here. The control wheel can be customized to control either the pan, tilt, or roll axes of the gimbal. I like to set this up to control my tilt. If you have the USB-C cable connecting your camera to the gimbal, this can also be set up to control your ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Coming around to the left side of the grip over here, we have another USB-C port. Now this one is used for charging the internal batteries of the gimbal. Coming around towards the back, we have a joystick right here for manually controlling the position of the gimbal. We have a record button. Now that allows you to start and stop recording or release the shutter on your camera via Bluetooth. And we have the mode button, which allows you to quickly scroll between all of the different operating modes of the gimbal. Coming around to the back, we have a 0.96-inch OLED display for seeing what you're doing. Not a video feed, but seeing what your settings are. And on the right side of the grip, we have a power button up top, we have a menu button down on the bottom, and we have a clickable scroll wheel here for navigating through your menu. Now coming down to the bottom of the gimbal, there's a 1/4-20 mount for attaching the mini tripod, as you can see. But there are also 2 more 1/4-20s there, and that's for attaching the Sling Mode setup that I'll show you later on in the video. Like I said earlier in the video, the Cinepeer Weebill 3E is a very small, compact, and lightweight gimbal, coming in at just 2.3 pounds. So that's why it's so surprising to me that the max payload of this little guy is 6.6 pounds. That's really impressive. I do have one word of warning though for those of you who are new to gimbals. You can't just look at the max payload and expect that any setup that falls under that payload limit is going to work. Because if you have a really long setup, you're not going to be able to get the center of gravity where it needs to be in order for the gimbal to work optimally. But I am very impressed because I have been running either my Sony a7 IV or my Sony a7S III, which I'm filming with right now, and a 24-70 G Master Mark I, which is the beefy version of this lens for those of you who don't know, and a small rig half cage. And this setup is really beefy. I think I weighed it, let me check. Yes, I did weigh it, and it was about 3.5 pounds. So again, this is a pretty good example of something that falls well within the max payload of the gimbal. But because of the way the weight is distributed, I think I'm close to the limits of this thing. So let me just show you. I'll balance it on here and show you how much room I have on the back, or lack of room. And as you can see, it works really well. No issues. Calibrated perfectly. I do want to show you, if I can you see in the camera? All right, so can you guys see that? It's pretty close. Not a lot of room to move back. All right, so anyway, that was just a really long-winded way of saying, don't just look at the payload, the max payload when you're shopping for a gimbal. Make sure that your setup will physically fit and work with the gimbal. One thing that I forgot to talk about, and some of you more savvy viewers probably already picked up on this, but I'm using a 24-70 lens, but I'm at 24 millimeters, which means that the barrel is fully retracted. And right now the camera is balanced perfectly, but it is pushed almost all the way to the back. So what happens when I extend the barrel out to 70 millimeters? Well, obviously it's going to throw the balance of the gimbal off. And what's nice about having that extra max payload headroom here is that you have an option here and you can add counterweights to the back of your setup to help bring that center of gravity more in line to where it needs to be. So if you're in the same boat, if you have somewhat of a longer lens and you can't balance your gimbal with your barrel extended all the way out, then get some counterweights to attach to the back of your ARCA plate right there. If your balance is just a little off, like say I didn't go all the way out to 70, but maybe I went out to 35, this would still be technically out of perfect balance, but the motors do have enough power that it's still going to work fine. It's just when you get out to the extremes, that's when you might want to start playing around with the counterweights. Now, I know I didn't show you how to balance the gimbal because there are a million videos on YouTube showing you how to do that, but if you guys do want me to show you how to balance a gimbal, then leave a comment down below. If there's enough interest, then I'll make a short video about how to do that. Let's say that you guys do know how to balance a gimbal, and once you do have it all balanced and everything is right where it needs to be, make sure that all of your axes are unlocked before you power up the gimbal, or else it's gonna throw an error at you. So make sure all of your axes are unlocked. Then you can power up the gimbal. Once it powers on, it'll go into its home position, and I usually like to run an auto calibration before every session. It's just a habit, an old habit. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna run the auto tune right now. You can see it shaking. It only takes 30 seconds at the most. Once the auto calibration is complete, your gimbal is ready to use. Now, the gimbal has all of the typical gimbal modes that you're used to seeing on other gimbals. So we have pan follow, we have lock, we have follow, we have POV, we have vortex mode, and we have portrait mode, which will allow you to shoot in a vertical orientation like this. With the 3E being such a small, compact gimbal, you're probably wondering how the battery life is. Well, Zhiyun claims 16 hours of battery life. Now, with all manufacturers, you have to take that number with a grain of salt because that's under ideal conditions. So obviously your mileage will vary depending on what your rig looks like geometry wise and weight wise, but also the type of content you're shooting, right? If you're not moving around very much, just nice and smooth movements, or if you're just standing still versus you're hanging out the back of a pickup truck filming rolling shots, you're going to get much different battery life with this thing. But in my practical tests, I don't think you'll have a problem getting through a full day of shooting under normal shooting conditions. So for like you wedding videographers, I think you'll get through a full day just fine. As I said earlier in the video, the 3E does support Bluetooth recording start and stop, which I know is a must-have for a lot of you out there. I personally don't like to use that feature just because I don't trust my fat fingers to not accidentally press that button in the middle of a recording and stop it. So I don't use that feature, but I know a lot of you do. So I think you'll be happy to know that this gimbal does have that. Similarly, I also mentioned earlier that you can connect a USB-C cable from the camera to the gimbal to control things on your camera such as shutter speed, ISO, aperture. And again, I don't like using those things just because I don't want to accidentally change something. So I always prefer to reach up, change it on the camera itself, and dedicate this dial for tilt. That's just my personal preference, but again, I know a lot of you guys out there, guys and gals out there, really like to have that functionality, so there you go. All right, that was an overview of the base 3E package. That's what you get for $250 US. But Zhiyun also offers Sling Mode accessories that you can buy separately. I don't think that it's a must buy, but I personally highly recommend it. The Master Move Pack is what they call it. Costs $140 US, and it comes with a quick release base plate. It comes with a wrist rest. It comes with an extendable and swiveling handle. And it comes with the base adapter right here. Now this whole assembly still has a 1/4-20 at the bottom, so you can still use your mini tripod with the Sling Mode setup. All right, so let me take a second to set up Sling Mode to show you guys how it all works. So first thing you do is remove that. Let me see if I can do this with the camera attached still, because I don't really want to have to remove this. Okay, so the first thing you do is attach the quick release base plate. And I didn't mention this earlier, but if you want to switch easily between Sling Mode and regular mode, you still have a 1/4-20 at the bottom, so you can run the mini tripod, which I think most people always have the tripod on their rig, because otherwise how are you going to set this thing down? So that's a nice to have. So then once you have the quick release plate installed, it's as easy as sliding these two things together. You'll hear a click, and then there's a locking lever, and you just slide that forward to lock it. Then we can attach the mini tripod back on. And we're good to go. Check it out. This arm right here can be extended up, and it can swivel around to the back, so that way you can go underslung. Now, I think that this wrist rest will be a little polarizing. I know some people will look at this and go, I don't need that. I've never used it. I don't want it. But I think some people will really, really like it. And I'm one of those people. I think it does make a big difference when you go pretty much any angle past 90 degrees. Once you start tilting this thing forward and this engages your wrist, it really helps take load off of your muscles, and it feels really good. So I'm a fan. And it's easily adjustable. There's a knob right here, and you can turn it, and the gearing is really nice because it takes just slight turns to get this thing to move a lot. So you can dial in the angle really, really fast. All right, so this is how the sling grip and the wrist rest looks in use. You can see that the wrist rest makes contact right here. As I start tilting the gimbal forward, it makes contact and takes a lot of the strain off of my arm. And this extra handle there provides a lot more confidence in this thing, and especially when you start going into an underslung kind of mode. The Cinepeer Weebill 3E also connects with Zhiyun's ZY Play app for gimbal control. So let me give you guys a little demo on that. Once you open up the app, you'll see that we have all of our typical controls here. We have a joystick, so I can move the gimbal position manually from here. Can roll like that. I can change the gimbal mode. Right now I'm in pan follow, but I can go to follow or lock. I'm gonna keep it in pan follow because that's usually what I'm in. If I did have the USB-C cable connected between the camera and the gimbal, I could set up some more of the more advanced photography features like panoramas, time lapses, or trajectory photography. I could also start and stop recording using the record button if I had that set up, but I already told you guys I don't like to use that. We also have a sync motion feature here, which allows you to mimic the movement of your phone like this. So that is pretty cool. With a run and gun type of setup like this, I'm probably never going to use the phone other than for firmware updates. But I did want to give you guys an overview of what you can do here if that's a big deal for you. All right, so some of you out there might have seen, or you might already have, the Weebill 3S, and you're wondering what are the differences between these two gimbals. So luckily I do happen to own a Weebill 3S, so let me take the camera off and let's do a quick comparison of the two side by side. All right, so here we have the Cinepeer Weebill 3E on my right and the 3S on my left. They look very, very similar, aside from the obvious color difference. But size-wise, they're pretty much identical. Weight-wise, they're identical. Let's go through some of the differences, though, that are a little less easy to spot. So right here on the 3S, we had a light, a built-in integrated light. And, well, I think it's a cool idea. And I did actually use it like a handful of times, just in very niche scenarios, in a pinch. It's not really something that I want to pay extra for. So I'm glad that they removed that. You can actually still see where they had the light here. There's just like a little placeholder. There are no, the Weebill 3S has built-in microphones. They removed the microphones on the 3E, which again, I never ever used that feature, so I don't mind that they removed that. Coming over to the front here, you'll see that there's a USB-C port there. So there are less ports on the 3E than the 3S. Now what you lose there is the ability to control an optional follow focus and a video transmission system. Now, with the size of these gimbals, I think that these are going to be more geared towards the more run and gun or beginner type of videographers. Now, I think that those people are going to be less likely to be wanting to run a follow focus or a video transmission system. So again, I think that Zhiyun made the right call on what features to cut. I think that the light, the microphones, the follow focus, the video transmission system, I think that those were all great things to cut in an effort to try to save cost and bring a more entry-level gimbal to the market. The 3S also comes with a lens support bracket and a separate riser plate here, and those are not included in the 3E. For me, like I said, that's not a huge deal because I like to run primes, especially on a smaller setup like this, so I won't necessarily miss these things. And if you do want those, they can be purchased separately for very minimal cost. The next difference between the two gimbals are their cases. Now, I have to give Zhiyun credit for including a really high quality case with the 3S, but I don't know if you guys have ever seen this thing, but it's comically big. This thing is so huge that it's never left my house. I've never once used this thing. I have no idea. I mean, look at this thing. It looks like Otani would be toting his bats around in this thing or something. It's really high quality and it looks cool, but it's not very practical. On the other hand, this is what you get with the 3E. It's not nearly as high quality, but it is a lot smaller, a lot easier to take around. One thing to note is that you won't be able to fit the Sling Mode accessories in this case if you do want to use this. All that being said, I don't really care too much about the cases. I know a lot of you do. Whenever I'm traveling with gimbals, they get folded down and put into my camera bags. So none of those things are a deal breaker for me, but that is another area where they cut cost, because I'm sure that big fancy bag added a considerable amount of cost to this thing. So I'm glad that they removed that actually. The biggest thing that I want to say here is that there's a $70 cost delta between these two gimbals. And I think Zhiyun made really wise decisions on where they wanted to cut costs, because at the end of the day, the things that really matter, the performance of the gimbal, they did not sacrifice. These two gimbals have the exact same max payload. They're geometrically the same, so they fit physically the same size setups, and the battery life on the 3E has increased over the 3S. This one has 16 hours. I don't remember what the advertised battery life is on this one, but I'll put it up on the screen right now. It's all wins in my opinion, especially considering that this is geared towards beginners or people looking for a more lightweight run and gun type setup. Before I get into the pros and cons of this gimbal, I'll put up some example footage that I took using this gimbal with my Sony a7S III. All right, let's get into the things that I like and dislike about this gimbal. Let's start off with the things that I like. So pro number one has got to be the price. So for $250 US, this is a fantastic value, and I think it's great for people just starting in their video shooting journey, or even for veterans who are looking for a more lightweight, compact, run and gun style setup. Pro number two is just the size and weight of this thing. Like I said earlier, it comes in at just 3.2 pounds. And when it's folded up, it's just barely bigger than a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which is pretty awesome. Pro number three is that despite its size, this thing can still produce really high quality, smooth footage with heavy payloads. And pro number four, which I know is an accessory add-on, but I do really like it, and that's the Sling Mode 2.5 system. I think it's super comfortable. I really like the wrist rest. I think that helps a lot. And I like the handle that it can swivel out to the side or into briefcase mode. I think it's really versatile and really nice to use. All right, so those were the pros, but now let's get into the cons. So con number one, I touched on this earlier in the video, and it's that I wish that there was more room for adjusting the camera forward and back. Because while this gimbal has a pretty high max payload, the dimensions of the gimbal don't allow for longer setups to be used. So in the next version of this gimbal, I would really like to see more room for adjusting the camera front and back. That would be great. Con number two is actually this plate right here where the camera mounts. There's nothing actually wrong with the plate itself, but coming from other gimbal systems, I'm used to having a mechanical stop in there. So when you insert your camera, you know you're in the exact same spot every single time. With this setup, if you're using all of the stock hardware, all the hardware that came with the gimbal, you're gonna end up drawing marks or scratching marks into the plates to make sure that you're in the same exact spot every single time, just to aid in balancing the gimbal in a shorter amount of time. The next con that I have is that sometimes some of these axes can be a little hard to slide up and down. It's not really an issue right now because it's not loaded, but once you have a load on here, a camera and a lens, it does make some of these pretty difficult to use sometimes. It's not a deal breaker, but it is something that you will have to get used to, and you do get used to it. Now, my final complaint with this setup is that I wish that they had added NATO rail accessory mounts to the side of the grip. While I do really like this Zhiyun sling grip setup, it is a little limiting because we can't use third-party accessories. You know, say I wanted to use a dual vertical handle setup, there's not really a way to do that with this. Also, if I wanted to use an external monitor out to the side, for example, it's not really nice. I could probably rig something up, but you know, you can tell that this is not going to fit. It will fit if I swing this around to briefcase mode, but you guys get what I'm saying. It would be nice if we had more options to use third-party accessories, because people like Small Rig and Ulanzi are already making a ton of arms and things that bolt onto those NATO rails. So it'd be really great if we could take advantage of that. So I'm hoping to see that on the next versions of gimbals from Zhiyun. All right, so what are my final thoughts? So overall, I think that this is a great choice for people who are just getting started with video, or even for you veterans out there who are looking for a more lightweight, compact, run and gun style setup. And especially for $250 US with a max payload of 6.6 pounds, I don't think you can find a better bang for your buck than that, or at least I haven't seen one. Like I said earlier, I think that Zhiyun did a great job in figuring out where to cut costs from the 3S to get us this more affordable 3E. They didn't have to sacrifice gimbal performance, and in fact, they increased the battery life, which again makes this gimbal such a good bang for your buck. All right, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If there's anything that I missed or if you have any questions, drop a comment down below and I'll do my best to reply to all of them. If this is your first time here, my name is Matt and I make videos about photography, video, I do gear reviews, all of that good stuff. So if you don't want to miss out on any future content, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps me out a lot. Again, my name is Matt and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.